How much longer are the Sens going to have to battle for a playoff spot without their captain? To discuss that and more, here are the insiders, Pierre LeBrun and Chris Johnston. Brady Tkachuk missing a second straight game after suffering an upper body injury against the Pens on Sunday. What's the latest on his return, CJ?
Well, it doesn't sound like it's going to be something that stretches on too long, although, of course, some alarm bells goes off. This was expected to be a one-game absence for Tkachuk earlier in the week, becomes a two-game absence with him missing Thursday's game against the Lightning. But internally, the Senators feel very comfortable about where Tkachuk is at. He's had a tough season, right? He missed some time during the Four Nations tournament and afterwards with a lower body injury, suffers a upper body issue after an awkward collision with Ryan Graves on the weekend. And I think the Senators feel like it's best just to give him some time to rest. While they are still fighting for that playoff spot, as you mentioned, they do have a bit of a cushion and a bit of flexibility here to give them that time off. So they're being sensible, they're being cautious, but I don't think there's any reason for anyone outside the walls to be too concerned.
In the meantime, Florida Panthers didn't have Aleksander Barkov in their lineup for that loss in Toronto on Wednesday night. And they're already a pretty banged-up team, as we know. But Barkov is doubtful for the weekend. The defending Stanley Cup champions have games in Ottawa and Detroit. However, I'm told that the injury is not considered serious. So that would be the positive spin on losing yet another key player, that they will get Barkov back, and they're not worried about not having him for the start of the playoffs.
Scary moment of the Canes and Caps game on Wednesday night. Carolina's Jalen Chatfield threw down the Caps' Connor McMichael. His helmet flew off. He smacked his head on the ice. How did the league see this, CJ?
Well, look, there was a lot of buzz about it. Obviously, a lot of people are naturally worried when you see a player in that position. GMs, coaches, media people, I mean, maybe don't like this takedown. But what I can tell you is the NHL's Department of Player Safety, when they saw this, they didn't have a lot of debate about whether there should be supplemental discipline for Jalen Chatfield. What they saw here was two players engaged in trying to push and pull each other for leverage and balance. They click skates and ultimately trip as they're going to the ice, which leads to how violent that throwdown ended up looking. But they didn't feel as though there's anything out of the normal there. And remember, this is a department with George Parros, Ryan Getzlaf, Stefan Quintel, people who have fought in the NHL. And their view, of course, was that really there was nothing to see here. Well, obviously, there was a little bit more concern elsewhere.
Guys, when we were at the GM meetings, Gary Bettman said he wanted to get down to some serious CBA talks with the NHLPA by the start of April. Where are we with that, Pierre?
Well, I guess he's a man of his word, because the two sides started negotiating on the CBA extension Tuesday in New York. They met again on this day, Thursday, in New York City, and they're trying to do it without much fanfare. In fact, that's one of the things that the NHLPA and the NHL have agreed upon early on here, is they're not in the mood to give a blow-by-blow update to media throughout the course of these negotiations. They want to keep a low profile. They want to keep a lid on things. Let's put it this way. If you start getting media updates from either side, that's when you know things have gone off the rails, and no one wants to see that. As far as how long this might take to get an extension done, I spoke to one source involved in the talks, and he said no prediction on that. Remember that Gary Bettman had said back at the December Board of Governors meeting, wouldn't it be great to have a CBA extension announced at the June Stanley Cup final? But at this point, no one can predict whether that can be done.
Wouldn't that be great? The NHL regular season ends 2 weeks from today. At that point, we expect to see a number of players come off LTIR and move right into the playoff action. Something teams can do because there's no cap in the playoffs. Is that going to be addressed, Pierre?
It is going to be addressed in these CBA talks. Gino, don't be a cynic, by the way. I got your tone on that. I understand what you're saying. And you know what? It's something that a lot of hockey fans keep talking about. It started with Patrick Kane in 2015, Nikita Kucherov in 21, and, of course, Mark Stone in 23. The reality is a number of teams, Toronto Maple Leafs, Florida Panthers, you name it, teams that are all in have used LTIR to the max in and around the trade deadline to have the deepest possible playoff roster. The reality is this is not an easy fix. Now, Ken Hall and Jim Neal are GMs in the past that have talked about having, doesn't matter what your payroll is, but come playoff time, your active roster should be cap compliant. That's one solution that's been proposed over the years. Bill Daly of the NHL has responded to that over the years and said that's a little too simplistic for a very complicated LTIR system. But either way, the NHL intends on dealing with this, if they can, with the NHLPA in this CBA extension. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of it.
All right, forgive me for being just a little bit suspicious. They are the insiders, Pierre LeBrun and Chris Johnston.